The warning bells screamed across the deep space monitoring station like nothing Senior Monitor Kexathera had heard in her 40 years of service. Her 6 eyes focused on the main display screen while her tentacles danced across the control panel, trying to make sense of the impossible readings flooding her instruments. "This cannot be right," she whispered in her native Zentorian tongue, then switched to Galactic Standard. "Computer, run full diagnostic on all sensors." The mechanical voice responded with calm efficiency. "All sensors functioning within normal parameters. Contact maintains current trajectory toward outer rim territories." Kexathera's main eyes narrowed while her auxiliary eyes continued monitoring other displays. The object approaching their position was moving faster than any known spacecraft. Yet it showed none of the energy signatures that should accompany such velocity. Every civilized species in the galaxy used bio-neural propulsion or quantum crystalline matrices. These systems left distinct traces that her sensors could identify from millions of kilometers away. But this contact showed something else entirely. Raw energy signatures that looked almost primitive, yet somehow more powerful than anything in the Council databases. The readings suggested controlled nuclear reactions and contained antimatter, technologies that the ancient texts described as theoretical impossibilities. "Senior Monitor," called Junior Technician Vex from across the control room. "The contact is slowing down. Energy output is changing." Kexathera moved to the main tactical display, her flowing robes rustling against the bioluminescent walls of the station. The unknown vessel was indeed decelerating, but not in any way that made sense. Instead of the gradual energy reduction that gravity manipulation drives required, this ship simply stopped producing its mysterious energy signature and continued moving forward on momentum alone. "Impossible," she breathed. "No ship can survive sudden deceleration from those speeds. The gravitational forces would tear apart any known hull material, but the vessel remained intact. More than intact, it was transmitting. "Senior Monitor, we're receiving a communication signal," Vex reported, his voice tight with nervousness. "Audio only, but it's using standard galactic frequencies." Kexathera authorized the transmission. Static filled the control room for a moment, before clearing into a crisp alien voice speaking heavily accented Galactic Standard. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation vessel Defiant Spirit. We come in peace and request diplomatic contact with any representatives of galactic civilization. We are broadcasting this message on all standard frequencies and await your response." The control room fell silent except for the humming of bio-neural processors working overtime to analyze the transmission. Kexathera felt her respiratory chambers constricting with shock. The message was simple, direct, and completely unprecedented. "Vex, contact the Council immediately," she ordered. "Emergency protocols. And get me everything our sensors can tell us about that ship." While Vex worked frantically at his station, Kexathera studied the tactical display. The vessel calling itself Defiant Spirit was large, roughly the size of a Council heavy cruiser, but its design made no sense. Instead of the flowing, organic curves that marked advanced civilization, it appeared to be constructed from straight lines and angular surfaces. The hull looked metallic rather than bioadaptive, and energy readings suggested it was simply a solid barrier between space and the interior rather than an intelligent living membrane. "Senior Monitor," Vex called out. "I have Council headquarters. They're patching you through to emergency session chambers." The main display shifted to show the concerned face of Council Arbiter Zix Mora, her normally composed features tight with worry. Behind her, Kexathera could see other species representatives gathering in the background, their voices creating a buzz of concerned conversation. "Monitor Kexathera, report," Zix Mora commanded in her crisp, diplomatic tone. "Arbiter, we have first contact with an unknown species calling themselves Terran Federation. Their vessel exhibits impossible technological characteristics and has requested diplomatic contact." "Impossible how?" Kexathera gestured toward her sensor readings. "Their propulsion system shows no gravity manipulation signatures, no bio-neural interfaces, no quantum crystalline matrices. Instead, they appear to be using controlled fusion reactions and contained antimatter for faster-than-light travel." A new voice joined the conversation as Admiral Vorta of the Hegemony pushed into view of the communication pickup. His scarred battle armor gleamed under the Council chamber lights as he spoke. Fusion and antimatter propulsion was theoretically studied thousands of years ago and dismissed as impossible to control safely. No species could develop such systems without destroying themselves. Yet their ship exists and functions, Kexathera replied. "I'm transmitting our sensor logs now." She watched as the Council representatives studied her data. Their expressions grew more concerned with each passing moment. Finally, a new voice spoke, ancient, whispered, and carrying the weight of vast knowledge. The ethereal collective's representative had joined the session. The old warnings spoke of this. The voice rasped, young fire that burns without wisdom, metal that flies faster than thought. The time of testing approaches. Admiral Vortog snorted dismissively. Ancient prophecies have no place in tactical assessment. What matters is whether this species represents a threat to galactic stability. Everything about them represents a threat to stability, interjected another voice as Chief Researcher Quindal appeared on screen. Monitor Kexathera. You said they're using antimatter containment systems. Confirmed. Large quantities from what our sensors indicate. That level of energy density should be impossible to maintain in any vessel small enough for interstellar travel. The containment requirements alone would demand resources beyond most planetary economies. Zixmora raised her hand for silence. Monitor, have they made any hostile moves? None, Arbiter. Their communication specifically mentioned peaceful intentions, and they're maintaining distance while awaiting our response. How long since first contact? Kexthera checked her chronometer. 17 standard minutes. And they've been patient this entire time? No demands, no attempts to approach our station? Correct. They appear to be simply waiting. The ethereal's whispered voice spoke again. Patience from young fire. This was not foreseen. Admiral Vortog leaned forward aggressively. Patience or tactical assessment? They could be studying our defenses, learning our communication protocols, preparing for attack. Or, Zixmora said firmly, they could genuinely wish diplomatic contact as they stated. Monitor Kexthera, prepare to respond to their transmission. Inform them that the Galactic Council acknowledges their request and that a diplomatic envoy will arrive within 1 standard day. Arbiter, is that wise? Vortog demanded. We know nothing about these humans or their capabilities. Precisely why we need diplomatic contact, Zixmora replied. Chief Researcher Quindal, I want a full analysis of everything we know about their technology within 6 hours. Admiral Vorta, place border fleets on standby but do not approach the contact zone. And someone find me everything our archives contain about antimatter and fusion propulsion theories. As the council session ended, Kexathara turned back to her displays. The human vessel continued its patient wait, energy signatures stable, making no aggressive moves, yet something about its very existence felt wrong, like a discordant note in a familiar song. She opened a communication channel and began composing her response to Captain Sarah Chen. As she did, a disturbing thought occurred to her. If these humans had developed impossible propulsion systems in isolation, what other impossible technologies might they possess? The answer to that question, she suspected, would change the galaxy forever. Outside the station's observation ports, stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that the balance of galactic civilization had just shifted with the arrival of a single, impossible ship. Council Arbiter Zixmora had seen many first contact situations during her long diplomatic career, but none that made her as nervous as stepping aboard the human vessel Defiant Spirit. The shuttle bay doors closed behind her diplomatic team with a solid mechanical clang that seemed primitive compared to the whisper-quiet bioseals used on civilized ships. Welcome aboard, Captain Sarah Chen said, extending her hand in what appeared to be a greeting gesture. I hope the docking procedure wasn't too rough. Our systems aren't designed for the bio-neural interfaces your shuttle uses. Zixmora carefully extended her own hand, unsure of the proper response. Captain Chen grasped it firmly and moved it up and down several times before releasing it. The human appeared to be middle-aged by galactic standards, with short brown hair, and wearing a simple uniform that showed none of the status indicators or neural interface ports common to advanced species. Captain Chen, I am honored by this meeting, Zixmora replied formally. May I present my team? Chief Researcher Quindal, Military Advisor Kethwar, and our Technology Specialist, Senior Engineer Nethwis of the Ethereal Collective. Pleased to meet you all, Chen said with genuine warmth. Would you like a tour of the ship? I know you're probably curious about how we build things. That was an understatement. Nethwis, whose species had spent millions of years perfecting bio-neural technology, was practically vibrating with scientific excitement. His ancient form, more energy than matter, flickered with unusual brightness. Your propulsion system, he whispered in his barely audible voice. How do you contain such forces without destroying your vessel? Chen smiled. Magnetic bottles and force field projection. Want to see the engine room? As they walked through the ship's corridors, Zixmora noted the strange mixture of advanced and primitive technologies. The walls were made of simple metal alloys, yet energy readings suggested they were somehow strengthened beyond theoretical limits. Lighting came from basic electromagnetic radiation, rather than bioluminescent organisms. But the power requirements indicated fusion reactions were providing the energy. "This is our main corridor," Chen explained as they passed crew members going about their duties. "Artificial gravity is maintained by rotating sections and gravitational field generators. Nothing fancy, but it gets the job done." Quindal stopped, walking. "Gravitational field generators? Captain, my species has spent 100,000 years trying to develop controllable gravity manipulation. Our greatest achievement is the bioneural drives that bend space-time for propulsion." "Oh, we don't bend space-time for propulsion," Chen said casually. "We just brute force our way through it with warp drive." "Brute force?" Nethwis whispered, his energy form flickering with alarm. "You force space-time to compress without bioneural guidance? Without consciousness interfaces?" "Right. We just pump enough energy into our warp coils to create a subspace bubble around the ship. The mathematics are tricky, but once you solve the field equations, it's just a matter of having enough power." They reached the engine room, and Zixmora's diplomatic composure nearly cracked. The space was enormous, filled with massive machinery that hummed with barely contained power. At the center sat what could only be described as a captive star, a fusion reactor containing temperatures and pressures that should have been impossible to maintain. "That's our main reactor," Chen said proudly. "Deuterium-tritium fusion with magnetic confinement. Produces about 50 terawatts when we're cruising. The antimatter storage is in the next compartment over." HFY, who had remained silent until now spoke up with military directness. "Captain, that reactor could power a small city. Why do you need such massive energy production for one ship?" "Well, warp drive is pretty energy intensive. Plus we need power for artificial gravity, life support, weapon systems, shields, and all the other ship functions." "Weapon systems?" HFY's combat instincts sharpened. "Your ship carries weapons?" Chen looked surprised. "Of course. Standard defensive armament. Railguns, particle beams, point defense lasers, and a few photon torpedoes for emergencies." The diplomatic team exchanged alarmed glances. In galactic civilization, most ships were grown rather than built, and their bioneural systems were inherently peaceful. The concept of mounting weapons on spacecraft was almost unthinkable. "These railguns," Quindal asked carefully, "what do they fire?" "Dense metal projectiles at about 15% of light speed. They're mainly for point defense against missiles and small craft, but they can punch through most armor if needed." Nethwis flickered urgently. 15% of light speed? The kinetic energy alone would be equivalent to fusion warheads. "Yeah, that's why we're careful about what we shoot at," Chen replied with disturbing casualness. "The point defense systems are computer-controlled to avoid accidents." As they continued the tour, each new revelation made the diplomatic team more uncomfortable. The humans had developed inertial dampeners to protect against gravitational forces that would liquefy most galactic species. Their hull armor was composed of materials that shouldn't exist, somehow maintaining molecular cohesion at relativistic speeds. Their computer systems used quantum processors instead of bioneural networks, making decisions through pure mathematics rather than consciousness. "Captain," Zixmora finally asked, "how long has your species been developing interstellar technology?" "Oh, about 300 years since we first achieved spaceflight. Warp drive was only perfected about 50 years ago." The corridor fell silent except for the hum of impossible machinery. 300 years. Most galactic species took millions of years to develop safely controllable interstellar travel, growing their technology slowly alongside their biological evolution. 50 years of faster-than-light travel, Quindal repeated slowly. "And you've built how many ships?" "The Terran Federation has about 2,000 vessels of various classes. Most are exploratory or cargo ships, but we maintain a defense fleet of about 300 combat vessels." HFY's military training kicked in. 300 warships, each carrying weapons of this power level? Well, the big dreadnoughts pack a lot more firepower than Defiant's Spirit. We're just a heavy cruiser. The casual way Chen discussed enough. Destructive power to sterilize planets made Zixmora realize the true scope of the problem facing the galactic community. These humans hadn't just violated the normal progression of technological development. They had created an entirely different philosophy of engineering, where galactic civilization had learned to work with natural forces, growing their technology organically over millions of years. Humans had simply overpowered every obstacle through brute force application of energy and materials. They contained forces that other species learned to guide. They built structures that other species grew. They solved problems through engineering that other species addressed through biological evolution. Captain Chen, Nethwis whispered, his ancient voice carrying newfound respect and terror. Do your people understand how dangerous your technology appears to the rest of the galaxy? Chen frowned thoughtfully. Dangerous? We've always assumed any species capable of interstellar travel would have similar capabilities. Are we wrong about that? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galactic community thought they knew about civilization, technology, and the proper way to explore the universe. Zixmora realized she was witnessing not just first contact, but the moment when the galaxy discovered that everything they believed about technological development was about to change forever. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 3 straight days, and tempers were reaching dangerous levels. In the great circular chamber of Nexus Prime, representatives from 47 different species argued with an intensity that hadn't been seen since the last major war centuries ago. War Marshal Kretor of the Hegemony slammed his armored fist against the speaker's podium, creating a sharp crack in the bio-grown wood. We cannot ignore this threat any longer. These humans have violated every principle of safe technological development. Their ships are floating disasters waiting to happen. They are not threats, countered Broker Prime Yilseth of the Mercantile Union, her multiple arms gesturing expressively. They represent the greatest trade opportunity in galactic history. Their energy production capabilities alone could revolutionize commerce. Revolutionize or destroy, growled Admiral Vortog from his position in the military section. I've reviewed the technical data 3 times. Their smallest ships carry enough firepower to level continents. Their largest vessels. He paused, checking his datapad. Their largest vessels register energy signatures comparable to stellar phenomena. Council Arbiter Zixmora tried to maintain order from her central platform, but the chaos of voices made it nearly impossible. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages, translation systems struggling to keep pace with the rapid-fire debates. Chief Researcher Quindal activated his personal speaker system, amplifying his voice above the din. The fundamental issue is not their military capability but their engineering philosophy. They have developed technologies that should not work according to established physics, yet clearly do work. This challenges everything we know about the universe. Exactly my point, Kretor responded, his scarred face intense with conviction. Any species that ignores natural law is inherently unstable. They will destroy themselves and take half the galaxy with them when their impossible machines finally fail. From the shadows of the ancient section, Sage Mother Aelthara of the Ethereal Collective spoke in her whispered voice that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. The old prophecies warned of this day. The young fire that burns without wisdom, metal that flies faster than thought, the catalyst that changes all things. Prophecies are not tactical intelligence, Vortag snapped. I need concrete data about their capabilities and intentions. I can provide data, offered Chief Researcher Quindal, activating the main display screen. My analysis of their technology reveals several disturbing patterns. First, they achieve faster-than-light travel through forced spacetime compression rather than bio-neural guidance. This requires energy levels that strain their containment systems beyond any safety margin we would consider acceptable. The screen showed technical diagrams of human warp drive systems, causing several representatives to recoil in horror at the crude yet effective design. Second, their artificial gravity systems manipulate gravitational fields directly rather than working with natural forces. They literally force gravity to behave according to their requirements. Third, and most concerning, Quindal continued, their hull materials are not adaptive smart materials or force field projections. They use metallic alloys and ceramic composites that maintain integrity through molecular bonding strengthened by quantum field manipulation. They have somehow convinced matter to be stronger than it should be. Yilseth leaned forward with obvious interest. Chief Researcher, could these techniques be adapted for civilian use? The energy production methods alone would eliminate scarcity for most trade goods. That's exactly the problem, interrupted Dr. Shental of the Scientific Advisory Board. Human technology is not scalable or safe. They solve problems through massive energy application rather than elegant biological solutions. Their fusion reactors contain temperatures found only in stellar cores. Their antimatter storage systems would destroy planetary-sized areas if they failed. Everything they build is one malfunction away from catastrophic failure. War Marshal. Kretor stood again, his armor gleaming under the chamber lights. Which brings us back to the central question. Do we allow this reckless species to continue spreading their dangerous technology, or do we act now to protect galactic civilization? You speak of acting against them, observed Minister Quinfell of the Peaceful Coalition. But their representative, Captain Chen, showed no hostile intentions during the diplomatic contact. She seemed genuinely surprised that their technology might be considered threatening. Innocence or ignorance doesn't reduce the danger, Kretor replied. A child playing with antimatter is still capable of destroying a solar system. Sage Mother Elthara's ancient voice whispered again. The prophecies speak not of destruction, but of transformation. The young fire changes all things, but does not consume them. Prophecies aside, Zixmora interjected, trying to regain control of the session. We need to address practical concerns. If humans continue to develop their technology, what does this mean for galactic stability? Dr. Shental activated her personal display. Computer modeling suggests several scenarios. Best case, their technology remains isolated to their own species, and they eventually achieve stability through biological evolution over the next few million years. Worst case, their engineering philosophy spreads to other species, leading to a galaxy-wide arms race as everyone tries to match their power levels. There's a third possibility, added Quindal grimly. They continue developing more powerful technologies at their current rate. Our projections suggest they could achieve stellar-scale engineering within centuries rather than millions of years. The chamber fell silent as representatives absorbed this information. Stellar-scale engineering meant the ability to manipulate entire star systems, build artificial planets, or harness the energy output of suns. Most galactic species considered such capabilities to be the province of the universe's theoretical elder races. How many ships did you say they have? Asked Minister Quinfell quietly. According to Captain Chen, about 2,000 vessels total, with 300 designated as military ships, Zixmora replied. And they developed all of this in 3 centuries? 50 years for faster-than-light travel specifically. Yilseth's trading instincts activated. If they can build 2,000 ships in 50 years, their production capabilities must be enormous. Most species take decades to grow a single interstellar vessel. They don't grow their ships, Quindal explained. They manufacture them. Mass production using automated systems and raw material processing on an industrial scale we've never seen. War Marshal Kretor stepped forward, his expression grim. How long before they have 20,000 ships? 200,000? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. If humans continued their exponential technological growth, they would soon represent a force that could dominate or destroy galactic civilization simply through overwhelming numerical and technological superiority. There is one more thing, Sage Mother Elthara whispered, her ancient form flickering with unusual intensity. The prophecies speak of choice. The young fire offers transformation, but the choice of how to accept it remains ours. What kind of choice? Zixmora asked. We can try to destroy the young fire and face the consequences of opposing fundamental change. Or we can learn from it and discover what the universe becomes when natural law bends to will, rather than will, bending to natural law. Admiral Vortog scoffed. Philosophy has no place in military planning. Perhaps, Elthara replied softly. But when facing a species that makes philosophy into technology, wisdom becomes more important than weapons. As the session continued into its 4th day, one thing became clear to every representative present. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, and the humans had already chosen their path. Senior Monitor Kexathera thought she had seen the worst of the human technological violations when Defiant Spirit first appeared on her sensors. She was wrong. The new readings flooding her deep space monitoring station defied not just physics, but sanity itself. How many contacts now? She asked Junior Technician Vex, though she dreaded the answer. 47 distinct vessels, Senior Monitor, and they're still arriving. Through the observation ports of the monitoring station, Kexthera could see distant points of light that marked human ships dropping out of warp. Each arrival created energy signatures that made her equipment scream warnings about impossible force concentrations and uncontained power sources. Senior Monitor called Technician Moore from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It's directed to Captain Chen aboard the diplomatic vessel. Put it through to the council immediately, Kexthera ordered, then activated the monitoring protocols. Whatever the humans were planning, the galactic leadership needed to know about it now. The transmission crackled with the familiar distortions of human communication systems before resolving into a crisp male voice speaking in their crude version of Galactic Standard. Admiral Jackson to Defiant Spirit. Sarah, we've got the whole Terran Expeditionary Force out here. The science boys back home want to know if these aliens are friendly, because our defensive systems are picking up a lot of weapon signatures in the local area. Captain Chen's voice responded from the diplomatic vessel. Tom, they're definitely friendly. Very curious about our technology, and I think we've given them a bit of a shock. What's our current fleet composition? 12 Dreadnought-class vessels, 18 heavy cruisers like yours, 15 destroyers, and 2 exploration ships. The science team wanted us to bring the experimental vessels too. So we've got the new antimatter research ship and that prototype that uses quantum tunneling for FTL. Kexathera felt her respiratory chambers constricting. 12 dreadnoughts. In galactic terms, a single dreadnought was a massive vessel capable of defending an entire solar system. Most species considered owning more than 3 dreadnoughts to be an act of aggression toward their neighbors. Tom, what kind of defensive systems are you detecting? Standard bio-neural weapon platforms, some gravity manipulation devices, and what looks like energy projection systems. Pretty sophisticated stuff, but nothing that registers above Class 5 threat level on our sensors. Class 5? Chen sounded surprised. That's lighter than our patrol boat armament. Yeah, I know. Either these species are really peaceful, or they've never needed to develop serious weapons. Makes me wonder how they handle pirates or hostile aliens. At the council chambers on Nexus Prime, emergency alarms were blaring as representatives scrambled to respond to the intelligence data flooding in from Kexthera's station. War Marshal Kretor stood at the central tactical display, his scarred face pale with shock as he studied the fleet composition readings. 12 dreadnoughts, he said to the assembled council members. The entire hegemony military has 8 dreadnoughts total, built over the course of 2,000 years. The humans have brought 12 ships of similar size as part of what they call an expeditionary force. Council Arbiter Zix Mora tried to maintain diplomatic calm, but her voice carried an edge of panic. What are the power readings from these vessels? Chief Researcher Quindal consulted his data displays. The largest ships register energy signatures consistent with multiple stellar core-level fusion reactors. Their antimatter storage appears to be measured in tons rather than the grams our most advanced laboratories work with. And they consider this to be defensive equipment? Asked Minister Quinfell of the Peaceful Coalition. According to their communications, yes. They seem to assume that any spacefaring species would have similar capabilities. Admiral Vortog activated his personal communicator. All hegemony fleets maintain maximum distance from the human contact zone. Do not approach, under any circumstances. From the shadows, Sage Mother Aelthara's whispered voice carried across the chamber. The young fire grows brighter. The transformation accelerates. Back at the monitoring station, Kexathera watched in fascination as the human fleet organized itself into what could only be described as a defensive formation. The massive dreadnoughts took positions that would allow them to protect the smaller vessels, while the destroyers formed a perimeter that extended millions of kilometers in all directions. Senior Monitor, Vex reported. Long-range sensors are detecting additional human vessels approaching. Much larger than anything we've seen so far. How much larger? Roughly twice the size of their current dreadnoughts and the energy signatures. Vex paused, rechecking his readings. Senior Monitor, these new vessels appear to be powered by artificial stellar cores. Not fusion reactors that mimic stellar processes, but actual contained star-like objects. Kexathera felt her world shift. Containing stellar cores as power sources was technology that most galactic species considered to be millions of years beyond their capabilities. The humans had apparently developed it as standard equipment for their largest vessels. The council chambers erupted in chaos as this new intelligence arrived. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages while translation systems struggled to keep pace with the panic-driven conversations. Order! Order! Zix Mora called out, but her voice was lost in the din of terrified voices. War Marshal Kretor climbed onto his platform and activated his emergency override system, flooding the chamber with his amplified voice. Listen to me. We are facing a species that treats stellar-scale engineering as routine technology. Their experimental vessels make our most advanced warships look like primitive shuttlecraft. What do you recommend? Called out Broker Prime Yilseth, her usual confidence replaced by obvious fear. Immediate evacuation of all border systems, full military mobilization, and prayer to whatever deities we believe in, because we are completely outclassed. Dr. Shental activated her analysis systems. Computer modeling suggests that a single human dreadnought could defeat the combined fleets of any 3 galactic species. Their experimental vessels could potentially sterilize entire solar systems. They wouldn't, Minister Quinful protested. Captain Chen seemed genuinely peaceful. Captain Chen commands a single ship? Creator replied grimly. We have no idea what the humans' overall military doctrine might be when they discover how weak we are compared to them. At that moment, a new transmission arrived from the human fleet. Captain Chen's voice carried across the council chambers with disturbing casualness. Admiral Jackson, the council representative, seemed concerned about something. They keep asking about our weapons and defensive systems. Well, tell them not to worry. Standard Terran fleet protocol prohibits hostile action against non-aggressive species. We're explorers and diplomats first. That's reassuring, but I think they're scared of our technology itself. Scared? Why would they be scared? Wait. Admiral Jackson's voice carried a note of realization. Sarah, what kind of weapons do these aliens have? From what I've seen, mainly energy projection systems and some gravity manipulation devices. Nothing that would pose a threat to fleet operations. You mean they don't have antimatter weapons? No relativistic projectile systems? No stellar engineering capabilities? I don't think so, Tom. Their technology seems to be based on biological systems rather than industrial engineering. The transmission fell silent for a long moment before Admiral Jackson spoke again, his voice carrying a weight of understanding that chilled every council member listening. Dear God, Sarah, I think we just discovered that we're the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, and they know it. The demonstration that changed galactic civilization forever began as a simple misunderstanding. Admiral Vortog had ordered the hegemony's finest warship, Eternal Dominion, to approach the human fleet as what he called a show of diplomatic strength. The massive bio-neural vessel, grown over centuries and representing the pinnacle of traditional galactic military engineering, moved slowly toward the human formation with all its organic weapon systems prominently displayed. Captain, Sarah Chen watched from Defiant Spirit's bridge as the alien warship approached. Tom, are you seeing this? She called to Admiral Jackson aboard the fleet flagship. I see it, Sarah. Impressive-looking ship. Very organic design philosophy. But our sensors show some unusual readings. What kind of readings? Well, it's definitely a military vessel, but the weapon systems are interesting. Looks like they use focused energy beams powered by biological processes. Might be effective against ships with similar technology. On the bridge of Eternal Dominion, War Commander Zethkar studied the human fleet through his ship's bio-neural sensors. The alien vessels maintained perfect formation, their angular metallic hulls reflecting starlight in ways that living ships never could. Most disturbing of all, they showed no signs of consciousness, no bio-neural interfaces, no living components. Just dead matter somehow organized into functional spacecraft. Commander, reported his weapon symbiont. The alien vessels are scanning us with electromagnetic radiation. Their sensors appear to be entirely mechanical. Mechanical sensors? How do they achieve target recognition without consciousness interfaces? Unknown, Commander. However, our bio-neural analysis suggests their weapon systems are far more powerful than initial estimates indicated. Zethkar felt his ship's anxiety through their shared neural connection. Eternal Dominion had never encountered technology so alien to natural development. Maintain diplomatic approach vector. Do nothing that could be interpreted as hostile. But the humans had their own protocols for dealing with unknown military vessels. Admiral Jackson activated the fleet's standard defensive procedures, which included what Terran Fleet Command termed target practice exercises. Routine firing tests to calibrate weapons systems in the presence of potential threats. All ships execute Standard Defensive Protocol 7, Jackson ordered over the fleet communication system. Sarah, pull Defiant Spirit back to safe distance. We're going to run the weapon calibration sequence. Tom, are you sure that's wise? The aliens seem nervous about our capabilities already. It's just target practice on that asteroid field. Standard procedure when unknown military vessels approach our formation. The nearest suitable target was a small asteroid roughly 1 kilometer in diameter, positioned about 50,000 kilometers from the main fleet formation. Jackson's flagship, the dreadnought TFS Indomitable, rotated slowly to bring its main weapons to bear. All stations firing single pulse from primary antimatter cannon. Target, asteroid designation, Alpha 7. The weapon discharged without ceremony, no visible beam, no dramatic energy effects, just a brief spike in the ship's energy output. For exactly 0.3 seconds, a stream of concentrated antimatter traveled at 95% of light speed toward its target. The asteroid simply ceased to exist. Where a kilometer of solid rock had been moments before, there was now only expanding plasma and scattered particles, the released energy briefly outshining nearby stars, before dissipating into the vacuum of space. On Eternal Dominion's bridge, every bio-neural system screamed warnings about impossible energy concentrations. War Commander Zethkar felt his ship's terror through their shared consciousness as organic sensors struggled to process what they had just witnessed. "Report," he demanded, though his own voice shook with shock. "Commander, the alien vessel discharged approximately 10,000 times the energy output of our most powerful weapons. The target was completely vaporized at the molecular level." 10,000 times? The energy release was equivalent to a stellar event. They destroyed the asteroid using controlled antimatter annihilation. At the Galactic Council chambers, emergency alarms shrieked as sensor data from the demonstration flooded the communication systems. Representatives who had been debating diplomatic approaches to the human problem fell silent as they watched the tactical display showing the asteroid's complete obliteration. Chief Researcher Quindall stared at his instruments with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had just collapsed. That was a single shot from one weapon on one ship. The energy release was equivalent to the total annual output of most planetary power grids. War Marshal Kretor's scarred face had gone pale. "They call this target practice?" "According to the communication intercepts, yes. Routine weapons calibration in the presence of unknown military vessels." Council Arbiter Zixmora realized that every assumption they had made about dealing with humanity had just become irrelevant. How many ships in their fleet carry similar weapons? All of them, apparently. Even their smallest destroyers register antimatter storage signatures consistent with weapons of this type. From the shadows, Sage Mother Aelthara's ancient voice whispered with something that might have been awe. "The young fire reveals its true nature. They have made the forces of creation into tools of their will." Admiral Jackson, completely unaware of the cosmic significance of his routine targeting exercise, opened a communication channel to Captain Chen. "Sarah, calibration complete. Weapons systems are functioning within normal parameters. You can rejoin the formation." "Tom, I think that demonstration might have made an impression on our new friends." "Good. Always best to be clear about capabilities during first contact situations." On Eternal Dominion, War Commander Zethkar was receiving frantic communications from his superiors. Every hegemony fleet in the sector was demanding immediate intelligence about the human capabilities, while the bio-neural networks were filing reports that their analysts were describing as impossible but confirmed. "Commander," his weapons symbiont reported quietly, "our ship's consciousness is requesting permission to retreat to minimum safe distance." "Granted. All stop. Maintain position, but prepare for emergency jump if necessary." The War Commander opened a direct channel to Hegemony Command. "Fleet Command, this is Eternal Dominion. The human vessels possess weapons capability far beyond our projections. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment of contact protocols." At the Council chambers, the reality of humanity's position in galactic civilization was becoming impossible to ignore. These weren't just technologically advanced aliens. They were a species that had solved problems through methods that made traditional galactic technology look like children's toys. They didn't conquer their way to technological supremacy, Dr. Shental observed with scientific precision. They simply developed engineering solutions that treat the fundamental forces of the universe as construction materials. "The question, now," Zixmora said quietly, "is what we do with this knowledge." As if in response to her words, a new transmission arrived from the human fleet. Captain Chen's voice carried across the council chambers with the casual confidence that had come to characterize human communication. "Admiral Jackson, I've just received new orders from Earth Fleet Command. We're authorized to begin formal diplomatic relations, establish permanent embassy facilities, and start the cultural and technological exchange program." "Technological exchange?" Jackson's voice carried surprise. "Are they sure about that? Our technology tends to be pretty intensive for most applications." "Apparently, the Science Council is excited about the possibilities. They want to see what happens when our engineering methods are combined with alien biological technologies." "That could be interesting." "Okay, Sarah. Transmit our standard first contact package to the Council representatives. Full technical specifications for basic fusion reactors, gravity manipulation systems, and antimatter storage protocols. The council chamber erupted in chaos as representatives realized that humanity intended to share their impossible technologies freely with galactic civilization. Some species saw opportunities that could advance their civilizations by millions of years. Others saw the end of everything they understood about the natural order of technological development. Sage Mother Elthara's whispered voice cut through the noise with ancient wisdom. The prophecies speak true. The young fire offers transformation, not conquest. The choice of how to accept it remains ours. Council Arbiter Zix Mora stood at her platform, watching displays that showed human ships beginning to disperse throughout galactic space, each one carrying technologies that would reshape entire species' understanding of what was possible. The galaxy had spent millions of years developing civilization based on working with natural forces, growing technology organically, and accepting the limitations that physics seemed to impose. Now they faced a species that had simply refused to accept those limitations and engineered their way past every obstacle through sheer determination and massive energy application. As she watched the humans begin their enthusiastic sharing of technologies that violated everything she thought she knew about the universe, Zix Mora realized that Sage Mother Elthara was right.